Welcome to a journey back in time, into a world of gods, heroes, destiny, and war. In this video, we dive into one of the greatest epics ever written, the Iliad by Homer. This timeless tale has echoed through centuries, recounting the mighty clash between the Greeks and the Trojans, and the rage of one man, Achilles, the greatest warrior of them all, against. But the Iliad is far more than a story of war. It is a poetic masterpiece that explores honor, wrath, pride, love, and fate. As we bring its characters to life in sans-serif chapters, you'll witness the passion of Hector, the wisdom of Odysseus, the pain of Priam, and the divine meddling of gods like Athena, Apollo, and Zeus. Whether you're a mythology lover, a history buff, or someone discovering this legend for the first time, this series will guide you through battles, duels, betrayals, and heart-wrenching losses. Each chapter offers stunning visuals, rich storytelling, and immersive character moments to truly capture the spirit of Homer's epic. So sit back, subscribe, and prepare to be swept into the flames of Troy, where glory is eternal, and every choice shapes the fate of heroes. The day begins with a sickly golden sun rising over the Greek camp on the distant shores of Troy. For 9 long years, warriors from across the Greek world have laid siege to the mighty city, but now death stalks their own ranks. It comes not from Trojan swords, but from the invisible arrows of Apollo, god of the silver bow. The camp is racked by plague. Horses drop dead in the dust. Warriors burn with fever, and smoke rises endlessly from funeral pyres. The cause is pride and wounded honor. The trouble began when Agamemnon, king of men and leader of the Greeks, claimed Chryseis, daughter of Apollo's priest, as his prize of war. When her father pleaded for her return, Agamemnon scorned him. The old man prayed, and Apollo sent disaster. Now the Greeks gather in council, desperate for relief. Calchas the seer, trembling before his king, reveals the truth. Apollo will not forgive until Chryseis is freed. Agamemnon's face flushes with fury, but the other chiefs, including wise Odysseus and powerful Ajax, press him. Reluctantly, he agrees to return Chryseis, but demands another prize in her place. He claims Briseis, the beloved of Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks. The insult is unbearable. Before all, Achilles denounces Agamemnon as greedy and dishonorable. Tempers flare. Achilles draws his sword, his rage like fire, but suddenly he freezes. Athena, unseen by all but him, appears and seizes him by his golden hair. She urges restraint, reminding him of his fate and the greater good. With immense effort, Achilles sheaths his sword. The moment passes, but the damage is done. Briseis is led from his tent, weeping. Achilles withdraws from the war, swearing he will fight no more for Agamemnon. That night, he sits alone by the sea and calls upon his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, pouring out his grief and wrath. Thetis, shimmering and sorrowful, promises to beg mighty Zeus to avenge her son's wounded pride. Thus, the Greek camp falls into gloom. Their strongest warrior is lost, not to battle but to pride. The quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon will echo through the coming days. Fourth, the quarrel, as gods and mortals alike are swept toward tragedy, while mortals rage and mourn on the battlefield. The gods of Olympus watch with restless fascination, their own rivalries fanning the flames of war. Thetis, her form shimmering like moonlit water, rises from the deep to visit Zeus, king of the gods. She kneels before his golden throne, her voice trembling with emotion as she begs him to punish the Greeks for the insult to her son, Achilles. Zeus, lord of thunder, hesitates. His promise to Thetis will stoke divine and mortal conflicts alike. Yet, bound by honor and the memory of old debts, Zeus gives a solemn nod. He will tip the scales against the Greeks, Meanwhile, clouds gather over Mount Olympus, not of storm, but of discord. Hera, proud queen of the gods, senses Zeus's secret promise and bristles with fury. She despises Troy and will do anything to see it destroyed, for Paris once judged Aphrodite more beautiful than her. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, joins Hera in her wrath, plotting together to help the Greeks. On the other side, Aphrodite, radiant and cunning, pledges herself to Troy, determined to protect Paris and his stolen bride, Helen. Apollo, golden-haired and vengeful, still resents Agamemnon for shaming his priest and gladly aids the Trojans, joined by his twin sister Artemis. The gods convene, tempers flaring, alliances shifting like clouds. Each proclaims the justice of their cause, but all are ruled by pride and old grievances. As divine power ripples through the world, the battlefield becomes their chessboard. Thunder rumbles ominously, signaling Zeus's sway. Apollo emboldens the Trojans, his invisible presence urging them forward. Athena whispers to the Greeks, lending them what courage she can. Among mortals, the effects are immediate. The Trojans surge with newfound vigor, while the Greeks falter, their morale sinking as wave after wave of attack crash upon them. Men sense the presence of gods, sometimes glimpsed in dreams, sometimes in the thrill of sudden strength or dread. Night falls, but Olympus is ablaze with light and quarrel. The war is no longer just a contest of men, but a cosmic struggle of immortal wills. Every wound and victory on the plain reflects the unseen hands moving from above. As Thetis departs from Zeus, her heart aches for the suffering to come, even as she fights for her son's honor. Thus, the ancient quarrels of gods entwine with the anger of men, ensuring that peace will remain only a distant dream. After days of bitter conflict and heavy losses, the battlefield falls strangely quiet as a challenge echoes between the armies. Patroclus, prince of Troy, whose reckless love for Helen sparked this war, steps forward and offers single combat to settle the dispute. If he wins, Helen remains in Troy. If he falls, the Greeks will claim victory and return home. Both armies agree, desperate for an end to the endless bloodshed. Menelaus, king of Sparta and Helen's rightful husband, seizes the chance for vengeance. Armed with resolve and righteous fury, he strides to the front. Paris, famed for his beauty more than his courage, pales at Menelaus's approach and briefly retreats in shame. But Hector, Paris's noble brother and champion of Troy, rebukes him before the watching hosts, reminding him of his duty and the eyes of Troy upon him. At last, Paris steels himself, and the two men prepare for battle. Helen is summoned to the walls by King Priam to watch the duel, her heart torn by regret and longing as the armies gather in a great circle, shields glittering in the sun. The duel is fierce and swift. Menelaus hurls his spear, grazing Paris's shield. Paris counters but misses. With a roar, Menelaus charges and seizes Paris by the helmet, dragging him toward the Greek lines. Just as Menelaus draws his sword to strike the final blow, divine intervention shatters the moment. Aphrodite, ever watchful over Paris, shrouds him in mist and whisks him away to his own chamber within the city. The Greeks shout in outrage, feeling robbed of their victory and justice. In Troy, Paris appears safe but shamed, and Aphrodite brings Helen to him, urging her to comfort the man who has risked so much for love, yet failed on the field. The truce collapses. The Greeks demand the return of Helen, but the Trojans refuse, emboldened by the gods' favor. Spears and arrows soon darken the sky again, as hope for a peaceful end is snatched away by the whims of mortals and immortals alike. On this day, The fate of many hangs by the slenderest thread, cut at the last by the unseen hand of a goddess. The war, for all its heartbreak, will rage on. The thunder of spears fades as dusk approaches, and Hector, the great defender of Troy, turns from the bloodied field and makes his way toward the city's high gates. His armor bears the dust and dents of battle. His spirit carries the heavy burden of leadership. The people of Troy part before him in the narrow streets, offering words of gratitude and prayers for his safety. Yet behind every grateful face, Hector sees fear, the fear that he, their strongest shield, may not return tomorrow. He seeks out his mother, Queen Hecuba, first. She urges him to drink wine and rest, to offer a libation to the gods. But Hector, ever dutiful, refuses refreshment until his task is complete. The city depends on him, and the war is not yet over. Winding through crowded lanes, he finds Andromache, his beloved wife, standing atop the battlements with their young son, Astyanax. She clings to the child, tears glistening in her eyes, and pleads with Hector not to return to the field. She fears the fate that befell her father and brothers at Greek hands will soon be his as well. Her words are heavy with sorrow. If Hector dies, she will be left alone, and their son will grow up fatherless, a shadow of his lineage. Moved by Andromache's grief, Hector embraces his family. He holds Astyanax in his arms and raises him toward the sky, praying silently to Zeus that his son will be stronger and happier than he. A proud prince in a free Troy. Yet Hector knows the cost of honor and the price of fate. He cannot forsake his duty, for all Troy looks to him. With a tender farewell, he places Astyanax in Andromache's arms and dons his gleaming helmet. The child recoils at the sight of the towering crest, and both parents share a bittersweet smile at the innocence of youth amid the storm of war. After a last embrace, Hector departs, descending from the walls as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the city. Citizens watch him go with mingled hope and dread. In this fleeting moment of peace, the human cost of the war becomes clear, not just in blood spilled on the plain, but in hearts broken and futures imperiled. Hector's courage lies not only in battle, but in his love for his family and city, and in his willingness to shoulder the burdens that come with both. Without Achilles, the Greek army is like a ship lost at sea. As dawn breaks, the Trojans surge forward, led by Hector's indomitable spirit and Apollo's favor. The Greeks, once so proud and confident, find themselves pressed back toward their ships, struggling beneath the weight of their losses and the ferocity of their foes. The Trojans, hearts emboldened by Hector's return, crash against the Greek defenses like a relentless tide. They breach the Greek wall in several places, forcing warriors to abandon their tents and rally at the edge of the sea. Agamemnon, wounded by the cost of his quarrel with Achilles, summons a war council amid the chaos. Despair gnaws at the leaders. Diomedes, stalwart and fierce, urges them to stand fast. Nestor, wise with age, reminds them that unity is their only hope. Odysseus, ever clever, proposes new strategies for holding the line and calls for Ajax, the giant among Greeks, to defend the ships. Ajax plants himself at the front, his shield a wall unto itself, turning back wave after wave of Trojan assault. The Greeks behind him draw courage from his example, but for every inch gained, another is lost elsewhere. Apollo's invisible hand seems to guide Hector, who leads his men straight to the ships, determined to end the war by fire. As the Trojans hurl burning brands, smoke and panic rise among the Greeks, their last hope teetering on the edge of destruction. Above the clamor, the gods watch and intervene. Athena and Hera, unwilling to see their favored Greeks destroyed, plead with Zeus for mercy. But Zeus, bound by his promise to Thetis, lets the Trojans have their day. Divine omens swirl in the sky. An eagle clutching a serpent, a blood-red sun, deepening the Greeks' fear. Nightfall brings a tense reprieve. The Trojans camp on the plain, closer to the ships than ever before, their victory nearly at hand. In the Greek camp, exhausted warriors tend wounds and repair battered armor, while leaders ponder desperate solutions. Some urge a humble appeal to Achilles, though pride holds others back. The absence of their greatest hero is felt by all. Achilles, brooding in his tent, is the silent center of the storm, a reminder that pride and anger can cripple even the mightiest host. As the firelight flickers over anxious faces, the Greeks must decide: swallow their pride or watch their hopes go up in flames. The sounds of battle drift faintly through Troy's winding streets. As Hector, the city's greatest defender, takes a rare moment to return to his home, the fierce clash of arms is replaced by the softer, Nengdi's kofter, more fragile sounds of family, of a child's laughter and a wife's gentle plea. As Hector crosses the threshold, Andromache rushes to him, her eyes bright with tears, Astyanax clinging to her skirts. Her fears have become reality. With the Greeks so close to the city, every heartbeat could be their last together. Andromache begs Hector to stay within the walls, to think of her and their young son, whose future is uncertain in a city under siege. She describes her nightmares: Troy in flames, their son hurled from the battlements, herself enslaved by Greek victors. Hector listens, torn between love and duty, his heart aching with the knowledge that destiny is as unyielding as the walls of Troy themselves. He gently rebukes Andromache's fears, not out of coldness, but because he knows he cannot choose safety over honor. He explains that shame before the men and women of Troy, and the urge to be remembered as a true protector, drives him back to battle. Yet he also shares his deepest dread, not his own death, but the suffering Andromache might endure after he is gone. He prays silently to Zeus that their son, Astyanax, will grow to be a greater man and a happier one, spared the sorrows of war. As he prepares to leave, Hector reaches out for his son, who shrinks away from his helmet's daunting crest. Smiling through his sadness, Hector removes the helmet and embraces Astyanax, pressing a kiss to his tiny brow. This quiet moment of fatherly tenderness softens the hearts of all who see it, even the anxious servants gathered nearby. Andromache and Hector share a final, silent embrace. She returns to the upper walls, eyes never leaving him as he strides back toward the gates, shoulders squared against the weight of fate. The people of Troy, watching from windows and doorways, recognize both the hero and the man, courageous on the field, gentle at home, trapped by the cruel necessity of war. As Hector disappears into the dust of the city, Andromache's prayers linger in the evening air, carried by the winds that have witnessed too many such farewells. With the Trojan offensive pushing the Greeks to their limits, a strange lull falls over the field as day draws to a close. Befokens, both sides, weary and wary, desire a respite from the relentless slaughter. The bravest among them propose a duel, a contest of champions that might bring honor and, perhaps, a turning point. Hector, never one to shrink from a challenge, strides into the open space between the armies and calls for a Greek to face him in single combat. The challenge echoes across the plain, but for a moment none step forward. At last, after drawing lots among the bravest, Ajax the Greater, towering, steadfast, and nearly peerless in strength, takes up his arms. The Greeks cheer as Ajax marches forward, shield shining, his massive spear gripped with calm determination. The two champions meet beneath the watchful eyes of their comrades, and the gods above, their every move heavy with the weight of nations. The duel is fierce and evenly matched. Hector's spear glances off Ajax's immense shield. Ajax's thrusts are turned by Hector's skillful parries. The clash of their blows rings out, echoing across the plain. Neither gains a clear advantage. For hours they exchange mighty strikes, each refusing to yield. Finally, as dusk descends, heralds from both sides call an end to the contest, citing the deepening darkness and the exhaustion of the warriors. In a rare moment of mutual respect, Hector gifts Ajax his sharp sword, while Ajax offers Hector his magnificent belt, a token of honor between two heroes. The armies, witnessing this exchange, are reminded that even in war, there can be dignity and recognition of valor. Both champions return to their lines, praised by their comrades, the field littered with broken spears, but not stained with more blood this day. That night, both the Greeks and Trojans hold feasts in honor of their warriors. Though the conflict is far from over, a sense of respect and uneasy peace lingers, if only for a brief moment, on the troubled plains of Troy. As the pale dawn breaks, Zeus, honoring his promise to Thetis, tips the balance of war sharply against the Greeks. From his throne atop Mount Olympus, he sends ominous omens. Thunderheads gather and lightning forks through the clouds. The Greeks wake with heavy hearts, knowing their fate is not entirely their own. On the battlefield, the Trojans, emboldened by the favor of the gods, advance with renewed ferocity. Hector, inspired by Zeus and flanked by the best of Troy's warriors, launches a devastating assault. Greek defenses crumble under the Sarpedon, prince of Lycia and a son of Zeus, fights valiantly alongside Hector, slaying many and pushing the Greeks further back toward their ships. Even the mighty Ajax and cunning Odysseus, though valiant, cannot halt the Trojan tide. Agamemnon and Menelaus are forced to fight shoulder to shoulder, their royal armor spattered with dust and blood. Panic spreads through the Greek ranks as Zeus hurls thunderbolts above them, a clear sign of his displeasure. Morale crumbles. Nestor, the oldest and wisest of the Greek kings, pleads with Agamemnon to humble himself and beg Achilles to return. Agamemnon's pride battles with his fear of utter defeat, and he finally admits his mistake. Achilles' absence has doomed their cause. At the Greek ships, Patroclus, closest companion to Achilles, watches the chaos from afar. He pleads with Achilles to intervene, but the proud hero refuses, his heart still hardened by rage and wounded honor. Instead, Achilles urges Patroclus to bear witness and deliver news of the Greek suffering, but he will not unsheath his sword for Agamemnon's cause. Meanwhile, the Trojans press their advantage. Their arrows rain down, their chariots roll ever closer to the beached ships. Fires are lit along the Greek fortifications. Zeus gazes down, unmoved by the suffering, determined that his promise to Thetis be fulfilled. As dusk falls, the Greeks are cornered, their fate uncertain. The Trojans camp on the plain, closer to the Greek ships than ever before. That night, the Greeks mourn their losses and look to the Black Sea, longing for rescue, while in Troy, the people feast and give thanks to the gods. But amid triumph and despair, both armies know the war is not yet decided. Zeus's power is great, but mortals and immortals alike sense that the turning of the tide is only the beginning of a greater storm. With the Greek army battered and cornered, the mood in the camp is desperate. Agamemnon, tormented by the consequences of his pride, finally heeds Nestor's advice. He agrees to swallow his arrogance and send an embassy to Achilles, buries free, hoping to persuade the great warrior to return to battle and save the Greeks from disaster. Agamemnon prepares rich gifts, gold, tripods, fine women, including the return of Briseis, untouched, and solemn oaths that Achilles will be honored above all others. He chooses Odysseus for his wisdom, Ajax for his strength, and Phoenix, Achilles' old tutor and surrogate father, for his emotional sway. Together, they set out through the shadowed camp to Achilles' tent, where the sounds of distant battle seem to underscore the urgency of their mission. Achilles greets them with respect but cool reserve. Odysseus is the first to speak, describing the peril the Greeks now face, and Agamemnon's sincere remorse. He lays out the offer: wealth, honor, friendship restored. Ajax appeals to the bonds of camaraderie. His plain words a call to duty. Phoenix, with tears in his eyes, speaks not as a diplomat but as a father, reminding Achilles of his childhood, of all they have shared, and of the greater destiny that awaits him if he returns. Achilles listens, but the pain of Agamemnon's insult still burns within him. He speaks with a calm fury, refusing the gifts and the honors. His anger, he says, is not so easily bought. He will not fight for a man who disrespected him, not even to save the Greek ships. For now, his heart is closed, though he thanks Phoenix for his love and laments the plight of his friends. The embassy returns to Agamemnon with heavy hearts and empty hands. The Greeks are crushed, hope flickers and dims. In his tent, Achilles finds no peace. Alone with Patroclus, he confesses that he longs for home, for an end to this endless cycle of violence and pride. Yet the call of fate is strong, and as the night deepens, Achilles' heart is torn between wrath and the sorrow of those he loves. Outside, the Trojans prepare for a renewed assault. The gods look on, their own rivalries untouched by mortal suffering. The war stands on the edge of a knife, awaiting the decision of a single man. With hope all but extinguished and Achilles still absent, the Greek leaders grow desperate for any advantage. Nestor, ever wise, proposes a dangerous plan: a night raid on the Trojan camp. Volunteers are called for, and Diomedes, famed for his daring and strength, immediately steps forward. Odysseus, the cleverest of the Greeks, joins him. The two arm themselves in silence, their hearts steady and their minds sharp for the peril ahead. Slipping through the moonlit camp, Diomedes and Odysseus make their way beyond the Greek walls. The air is thick with tension as they move through the shadows. The air, passing sleeping sentries and the smoldering remains of battle. Their goal, to steal information, sow chaos, and tip the scales back in favor of the Greeks. In the darkness, they capture Dolon, a Trojan scout sent by Hector to spy on the Greek positions. Terrified and desperate to save his life, Dolon reveals the location of the recently arrived Thracian allies, led by the mighty King Rhesus. He describes their glittering horses and rich tents, prizes ripe for the taking. Diomedes and Odysseus act swiftly. They slip into the Thracian camp, moving like shadows. Diomedes, his sword swift and silent, dispatches King Rhesus and his guards. Odysseus gathers the magnificent horses, guiding them out with care and cunning. Their mission accomplished, the pair race back to the Greek camp before dawn, evading discovery. Their return is met with cheers and renewed hope. The captured horses are paraded before the army, symbols of cunning and valor. Nestor and the other leaders praise Diomedes and Odysseus for their bravery, and the story of the night raid spreads quickly through the ranks. The Greeks, though still besieged and battered, find new resolve in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, the Trojans awake to grief and confusion, their allies slain and their numbers weakened. Hector mourns the loss, but steels himself for what comes next, vowing to press the attack before the Greeks can recover. But for one night, the fortunes of war are shifted, not by brute strength alone, but by the daring and intelligence of two extraordinary men. As morning dawns, the temporary hope granted by Diomedes and Odysseus's night raid begins to fade. The Trojans, stung by the loss of their allies, rally with fierce determination. Hector leads them in a relentless new assault, spurred on by Apollo, who walks unseen beside him, filling his heart with fire and his arm with strength. The Greeks are battered and weary. Even the greatest among them are not spared the horrors of the day. Agamemnon is among the first to be struck, wounded in the arm by a Trojan spear. He grits his teeth and continues to fight, but blood seeps from beneath his armor, and at last he is forced to retreat from the front lines. Machaon, the healer, binds his wound, as the army looks on in worry. Next, Diomedes himself is hit by an arrow, fired by Paris from the Trojan ranks. The wound is not mortal, but it slows even this tireless warrior. Odysseus, Ajax, and Eurypylus, too, are all wounded as the battle sways back and forth. Ajax's shield is battered, and Odysseus is hemmed in by enemies, yet they refuse to yield, inspiring their men through sheer grit and resolve. Amid the chaos, Nestor, the aged but cunning king, recognizes the critical danger. He rides his chariot from wounded camp to wounded camp, encouraging the Greeks, urging them to hold fast. Yet even Nestor knows that the heart of the army, its hope and its salvation, still sits idle in Achilles' tent. Back among the ships, Patroclus witnesses the endless stream of wounded leaders returning from the field. The once proud Greek army now fights defensively, their spirits flagging with every new loss. The cries of the dying and the shouts of the desperate echo between the tents. At the same time, the Trojans sense their advantage. Hector, tireless and unstoppable, leads his men closer and closer to the ships. He dreams of fire and final victory. Apollo, still supporting the Trojans, strikes terror in the hearts of the Greeks, scattering their lines whenever the tide threatens to turn. By nightfall, the beach is a patchwork of battered bodies and wounded heroes. The Greeks' finest are out of the fight, and it seems as though only a miracle, or the return of Achilles, can save them now. As the sun sets, a heavy silence falls on the Greek camp. Even the bravest men look to the sea and wonder if they will ever see home again. With the Greek champions wounded and their defenses faltering, the Trojans sense victory is near. At dawn, the mighty Hector rallies his warriors on the plain, his voice carrying hope and confidence through the ranks. Behind him, the Trojans gather not only their bravest men, but also allies from far and wide, Lycians, Thracians, Dardanians, all eager for a share of glory and the spoils of the Greeks' ships. The Greeks, meanwhile, fortify their wall, a makeshift barricade of stones and sharpened stakes built to protect the ships from Trojan assault. Behind it, weary warriors brace for the coming storm, their leaders wounded or absent. The air hums with anxiety, and even the bravest among them cast nervous glances toward Achilles' empty tent. As the battle begins, the Trojans surge forward, their chariots and foot soldiers pressing relentlessly against the Greek defenses. Sarpedon, the mighty Lycian prince and son of Zeus, is first to lead his men against the wall. With his companion Glaucus at his side, he encourages his allies to show courage worthy of their fathers and the gods. Together, they batter the Greek fortifications, using axes and bare hands to rip away stakes and stones. The Greeks fight valiantly, hurling stones, spears, and oiling pitch from atop the wall. The mighty Ajax and valiant Teucer, the best archer among the Greeks, hold key positions, driving back the enemy again and again. But the Trojans are relentless. Hector, inspired by Apollo, rallies his men to a single point and, with a great heave, smashes open the gates with a massive boulder. With a triumphant cry, Hector leads the Trojans through the breach. The Greeks fall back in disarray, scrambling to protect the ships. The battlefield becomes a desperate melee. Swords flash, arrows fly, and the air is thick with the clash of bronze and the cries of the wounded. As dusk approaches, the Trojans are closer than ever to the Greek ships. Fires burn along the beach, casting flickering shadows across the chaos. The Greeks, backs to the sea, prepare for the worst. Some pray for Achilles to return. Others simply fight on, hoping for a miracle. High above, the gods watch intently. Zeus, satisfied that his will is done, allows the battle to rage unchecked. The fate of the Greeks hangs by a thread, and the world seems to hold its breath. The sun hangs low as the Trojans pour through the breached Greek wall. Victory nearly within their grasp. The battered Greeks, backs to the sea, refuse to surrender. As chaos threatens to sweep through the camp, the gods' attention shifts again. Poseidon, lord of the sea, sees his beloved Greeks on the brink of disaster. Resentful that Zeus favors the Trojans, Poseidon secretly rises from the deep, his presence unseen but powerful, filling the Greeks with sudden vigor and courage. Great Ajax and Idomeneus of Crete rally their men near the ships. Idomeneus, fierce and unyielding, charges through the ranks, cutting down Trojan warriors with his glittering blade. Meriones, his loyal comrade, fights beside him. Ajax, standing like a fortress at the prow of a ship, deflects spear after spear with his massive shield, his booming voice encouraging the wavering Greeks. On the Trojan side, Hector senses victory and presses the attack. Yet even as he surges forward, a strange resistance meets him. Deiphobus, his brother, and Aeneas, the indomitable son of Aphrodite, join the fray, pushing against the Greeks' sudden resurgence. Fierce battles rage among the ships, the ground slick with blood and ringing with the sound of clashing bronze. Amid the tumult, Poseidon moves through the Greek ranks in disguise, inspiring courage, steadying nerves, and urging the warriors not to falter. The Greeks begin to rally, fighting not just for their own lives but for the honor of their homes far away across the wine-dark sea. Menelaus, spurred on by Poseidon's secret encouragement, seeks out Paris. The two meet in furious combat, Menelaus fighting not just for glory but for Helen, the cause of this endless war. Nearby, little Ajax, Oilean Ajax Shitch, and Teucer pour arrows and javelins into the advancing Trojans, pushing them back step by bloody step. Gradually, the tide of battle turns. The Trojans are stunned by the renewed Greek resistance, falling back from the very edge of the ships. Hector, undaunted, tries to rally his men, but an ominous wound, delivered by a thrown rock from great Ajax, momentarily dazes him, forcing him from the front. As night approaches, the Greeks hold their ground. Fires are lit along the shore, flickering beacons of hope in the encroaching darkness. Both sides count their losses and brace for another day. But for now, the Greeks have bought themselves a fragile respite, and Poseidon returns to the sea, his heart swelling with pride for the mortals who refused to yield. As darkness falls over the embattled camp, the Greeks hold their tenuous line by the ships, but the threat of ruin still looms. On high Olympus, Hera, queen of the gods, can bear the suffering of her favorite Greeks no longer. Zeus, bound by his promise to Thetis, continues to favor the Trojans, but Hera is determined to turn the tide, even if it means deceiving the king of the gods himself. Hera devises a bold plan. She adorns herself in her finest robes, veils her face, and perfumes herself with the scent of ambrosia. With cunning and charm, she travels to Mount Ida, where Zeus rests, watching the battle below. There, she seduces Zeus, distracting him from the war. Sleep, the god of slumber, whom Hera has persuaded with gifts and promises, hovers nearby. The moment Zeus is lulled into a deep, enchanted sleep in Hera's arms, Hector, sleep hurries to deliver the news to Poseidon. Seizing his opportunity, Poseidon rises again from the sea. Unopposed by Zeus, he lends his full power to the Greeks, filling their warriors with unshakable courage and making their arms swift and strong. The Greek leaders sense the change. Ajax, Idomeneus, Menelaus, and the others rally the ranks and surge forward, pressing the Trojans back with renewed fury. On the battlefield, Hector feels the withdrawal of Zeus's favor, as confusion spreads among the Trojan lines. Ajax smashes into the Trojans like a living wall. Idomeneus and Meriones cut down enemy after enemy. Even Hector, tireless and valiant, is struck down by a mighty stone hurled by Ajax, rendering him unconscious for a time and forcing the Trojans to drag him from the field. The Greeks regain ground, pushing the Trojans away from the ships, reclaiming much of the ground they lost. Morale soars as the night is filled with cries of victory rather than despair. But atop Mount Ida, Zeus awakens. Realizing he has been tricked, he is enraged, but the battle has already shifted. Hera feigns innocence, and sleep flees to the ends of the earth. Zeus warns Hera that the Trojans must not be utterly destroyed before fate has its due, and the balance of the war will soon swing back again. For this one night, thanks to the cunning of Hera and the might of Poseidon, the Greeks have hope once more. Yet all on the plain know that with the dawn, the favor of the gods can change in an instant. Zeus awakens atop Mount Ida, the realization of Hera's deception blazing in his eyes. Enraged by her cunning, he summons Iris, the swift messenger goddess, and Apollo, the god of light and plague. His booming command shakes Olympus and echoes across the plain. The Trojans must not fall yet, for fate decrees that Achilles' wrath must bring about the true turning point of the war. Obediently, Iris rushes to the Trojan camp, bringing Zeus's orders for renewed attack. Apollo descends like a shaft of sunlight, his presence invisible to mortals but felt in every heartbeat of Troy's warriors. He seeks out Hector, still wounded from Ajax's stone, and touches him with healing power. Hector's pain melts away, his strength surges, and he rises with new, almost divine, vigor. The Trojans rally at Hector's call, emboldened by Apollo's favor. They charge the Greeks with renewed fury. This time, nothing can stand in their path. Hector, radiant and tireless, leads the way, scattering the Greeks and smashing through the defenses they rebuilt the night before. Ajax, Idomeneus, and the remaining chiefs fight valiantly, but the momentum has shifted once more. The Greeks are pressed hard against their ships, the threat of fire looming ever closer. On Olympus, Poseidon is forced to withdraw by Zeus's command. The sea gods help ebbs away, leaving the Greeks to their own strength and resolve. Hera and Athena watch in frustration, unable to intervene further without incurring Zeus's terrible wrath. In the thick of battle, Patroclus and Nestor tend the wounded and urge the men not to lose heart. But morale is sinking fast. The Trojans, with Hector at their head, set torches to the Greek ships. Flames lick at the hulls, the smoke mixing with shouts of fear and the clash of arms. Zeus, from his high seat, watches the carnage unfold with grim satisfaction, knowing that all is unfolding as fate demands. The Greeks, exhausted and despairing, look desperately toward Achilles' tent, their last hope. As the day ends, the Greeks are on the brink of annihilation. The ships burn, the Trojans exult, and the gods above watch the balance of fate swing once again. Only the will of one man, Achilles, can now alter the course of war. The Greek camp is shrouded in smoke and despair as flames consume their ships. The Trojans, led by the unstoppable Hector, press their advantage, sure that victory is within reach. In his tent, Achilles sits apart, torn between pride and the cries of his suffering friends. At last, Patroclus, his dearest companion, can bear it no longer. He pleads with Achilles to let him don the great hero's armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle, hoping that the sight of Achilles' famed gear will strike fear into the Trojans and save the Greeks from utter destruction. Achilles, moved by friendship and desperation, agrees. He warns Patroclus to drive back the Trojans from the ships, but not to pursue them all the way to Troy's gates, lest he tempt fate. Patroclus dons Achilles' shining armor, its weight both a comfort and a burden, and rallies the Myrmidons for a sudden, thunderous charge. The battle shifts immediate. The Trojans, seeing the gleaming armor and believing Achilles himself has returned, break ranks in terror. Patroclus leads the Myrmidons with unmatched valor, driving the enemy away from the burning ships. He slays Sarpedon, the mighty Lycian prince and son of Zeus, fulfilling part of the god's own sorrowful fate. The Greeks rally behind Patroclus, pushing the Trojans back across the plain, but victory breeds overconfidence. Ignoring Achilles' warning, Patroclus presses the attack to the very walls of Troy. There, the gods themselves intervene. Apollo strikes him from behind, dazing him, while Euphorbus, a young Trojan, lands the first wound. Then Hector finds Patroclus, wounded and alone, and delivers the fatal blow. Patroclus falls, his armor stripped by Hector, who claims it as his prize. With his dying breath, Patroclus prophesies Hector's own death at Achilles' hands, planting the seeds of doom in the heart of Troy's greatest champion. News of Patroclus's fall spreads like wildfire. The Greeks fight desperately to recover his body, and the Trojans to hold it. In his tent, Achilles learns the news, and the full fury of his wrath and grief is awakened at last. The death of Patroclus sends shockwaves through both armies. His body, stripped of Achilles' armor by Hector, lies on the battlefield, a prize fiercely contested by Greeks and Trojans alike. With the sun blazing high and the plain strewn with fallen warriors, both sides surge and clash above the fallen hero, desperate to claim or protect his mortal remains. Menelaus is first to reach Patroclus. Driven by loyalty and rage, he stands over the body, fending off wave after wave of Trojan attacks. Euphorbus, the young Trojan who struck Patroclus first, dares to challenge Menelaus, but is swiftly cut down. Yet the struggle is far from over. Hector, still flushed with his recent victory, calls on the Trojans to seize the corpse and deny Achilles the rites of burial for his beloved friend. Ajax the Greater, a pillar among the Greeks, charges into the fray to aid Menelaus. With his massive shield and booming voice, Ajax turns the tide, repelling Hector and the Trojans, if only for a moment. Still, the press of war is relentless. Hector calls for reinforcements. Glaucus, Aeneas, and others rally around him, redoubling their assault. The battlefield becomes a maelstrom, the ground slick with blood and littered with fallen arms. The gods watch intently. Apollo, ever the champion of Troy, inspires Hector and clouds the eyes of the Greeks, sowing confusion. Yet Athena, indignant at Apollo's interference, lends courage to Ajax and Menelaus, pushing them to ever greater feats. The deadlock is complete. For every Greek gain, the Trojans counter, the prize always just out of reach. Amidst the chaos, the Myrmidons, led by Automedon, Achilles' loyal charioteer, fight with reckless fury to rescue Patroclus' body. The fighting rages over every inch. Spears snap, shields splinter, and the dust swirls as the battle ebbs and flows. The struggle lasts for hours. The sun begins to sink, its red light turning the plain to bronze. At last, through valor and the intervention of the gods, Ajax and Menelaus, with the help of the Myrmidons, managed to lift Patroclus's body from the press and carry it back toward the Greek lines. Hector, furious but exhausted, is forced to retreat, his prize lost, but the cost is terrible. The battlefield is strewn with the dead and dying, the grief of loss weighing heavily on both sides. The Greeks bear Patroclus's body back to Achilles' tent, and as the news spreads, the camp falls into a hush of mourning, one that will soon give way to a storm of vengeance. The Greek camp is cloaked in grief as Patroclus's body is brought back from the battlefield. Achilles, the greatest of the Greeks, learns of his friend's death, and for the first time since the quarrel with Agamemnon, his pride gives way to overwhelming sorrow and rage. Achilles falls to the ground, weeping and covering his head with ashes. The cries of his anguish echo through the camp, and every Greek feels the chill of approaching destiny. Thetis, Achilles' divine mother, hears her son's lament from the depths of the sea. She rises, shimmering and sorrowful, to comfort him. Achilles tells her of Patroclus' death and his vow to avenge his friend, no matter the cost, even if it means his own death, as fate has foretold. Thetis warns Achilles of his doom, but cannot turn him from his path. She promises to bring him new armor, worthy of his might, forged by the god Hephaestus himself. As Thetis departs, Achilles gathers the Greeks, proclaiming his return to battle and vowing vengeance on Hector. His presence alone renews hope among the weary warriors, but also fills them with dread, for they know that blood and tragedy will follow. Meanwhile, the Trojans celebrate, with Hector proudly donning Achilles' old armor taken from Patroclus' corpse. Yet his glory is shadowed by omens. His mother, Hecuba, and his wife, Andromache, sense impending doom. Even Hector himself feels a strange weight in his heart as he prepares for the fight that must come. That night, Thetis visits Hephaestus, the divine smith, in his blazing forge. She pleads for new armor for her son, describing Achilles' grief and fate. Hephaestus, moved by her tears, sets to work. Sparks fly as he crafts a wondrous shield, depicting the heavens, the earth, cities at peace and at war, all the beauty and terror of mortal life. He forges a breastplate that shines like the sun, a helmet crested with gold, and greaves stronger than bronze. At dawn, Thetis returns to Achilles, presenting him with the divine armor. Achilles, transformed by sorrow and clad in god-wrought steel, is reborn as an avenging force. His eyes burn with purpose, and the Greeks gather in awe and fear, ready to follow him into the storm of battle. On this night, the fates tighten their grip. The return of Achilles means the war's deadliest days have come, and old Troy trembles for what is to follow. Dawn breaks over the Greek camp, shimmering on the sea and reflecting off Achilles' newly forged armor. The mood has shifted. Fear and despair have given way to hope and an undercurrent of dread. Achilles, the wrathful son of Peleus, gathers the Greek host before the ships. His presence is electric, his eyes fierce with purpose. Even the bravest warriors step aside as he moves through their ranks. Agamemnon, contrite at last, meets Achilles before the assembled army. In front of all, he offers gifts, including the return of Briseis, swearing he never touched her. He admits his error and pleads for Achilles' forgiveness. Achilles accepts Agamemnon's gifts without bitterness, for his mind is now set on vengeance for Patroclus above all else. The feud that divided the Greeks is finally ended. Achilles calls for the immediate arming of the host. The Myrmidons, his loyal followers, prepare themselves, and the other Greeks are inspired by the hero's return. Achilles refuses food and drink. His hunger is for justice alone. He leads the army in sacrifice to Zeus and calls for healing for his wounded men, including Agamemnon, and Odysseus. The gods accept his offerings, and the Greeks feel divine strength flowing back into their limbs. Briseis, returned to Achilles' tent, mourns Patroclus, weeping for the fallen friend who showed her kindness amid war. A sorrow deepens Achilles' resolve. The camp is a flurry of preparation, armor gleaming, spears sharpened, chariots readied for the assault. Achilles addresses his men with words both mournful and fiery, vowing that Troy will pay dearly for Patroclus' death. The Trojans, watching from their walls, see the renewed energy in the Greek lines. A terrible fear grips their hearts as rumors spread that Achilles, invincible and enraged, has rejoined the fight. Hector feels the weight of destiny bearing down upon him, but steels himself to meet fate on the field. As the sun climbs, Achilles mounts his immortal horses, Xanthus and Balius, who weep at the loss of Patroclus and warn their master of his own impending doom. Achilles, undaunted, leads the Greeks in a thunderous charge. The battlefield trembles at his coming, and the Trojans brace themselves for the fury about to be unleashed. The war's most brutal day begins, with vengeance and fate driving both armies forward. The return of Achilles signals that the end is drawing near, and the cost will be measured in rivers of blood and the sorrow of gods and men alike. The earth shudders as Achilles bursts onto the battlefield, the new armor of Hephaestus blazing in the morning light. His rage is a storm, sweeping the Greek lines into motion and striking terror into Trojan hearts. The gods, sensing the world-changing moment, abandon their neutrality. At Zeus's command, they descend to the field, some to guard their favorites, others to ensure that fate unfolds as it must. Achilles plunges into the fray like a force of nature, mowing down Trojans with every swing of his spear. His eyes are fixed only on Hector, but he leaves a trail of destruction in his wake. The Trojans, who once pressed so close to the Greek ships, now flee in chaos, scattering before Achilles' wrath. Even the bravest heroes, Aeneas, Deiphobus, and Glaucus, dare not face him alone. Aeneas, prompted by Apollo, stands his ground and challenges Achilles. The earth itself seems to pause as the two demigods clash, their shields ringing and their spears flashing. Achilles' might is overwhelming, but Poseidon intervenes to save Aeneas, snatching him away in a swirl of mist. The gods bicker, each maneuvering to aid or protect their chosen mortals, as chaos reigns both above and below. Amid the carnage, the river Scamander, swollen with the blood of the fallen, rises up in anger against Achilles for polluting its waters with corpses. The river god hurls waves at Achilles, who barely escapes drowning as Hera, Hephaestus, and other gods intervene to save him. The earth itself seems to groan under the violence of the struggle. The Trojans seek shelter behind the walls of Troy, but Hector refuses to hide. He urges his warriors to hold the line and prays to Apollo for aid. Achilles slays warrior after warrior, Lycagon, Polydorus, and countless others, unstoppable in his fury. His armor glints like lightning, his voice roars above the din, and the battlefield becomes a landscape of terror and glory. On Olympus, Zeus allows the gods to fight among themselves, their ancient rivalries breaking out in the open as the mortal battle mirrors their immortal conflicts. Hera and Athena aid the Greeks, Apollo, Artemis, and Aphrodite support the Trojans. The war is no longer just of men. but of gods and destiny. As the day wears on, Achilles carves a path toward Troy's gates. The Trojans, battered and broken, are driven within the walls. Only Hector remains, his courage undiminished, awaiting the coming storm. The end of the war is in sight, but the most fateful confrontation is yet to come. The battle rages on the plain, but Achilles has become an unstoppable force, cutting down Trojans with savage speed. The corpses pile high, clogging the banks of the river Scamander, which flows past Troy. The river's waters run red with blood, and soon the god of the river himself can bear it no longer. Scamander rises, furious at the desecration of his stream. Achilles, lost in the fury of vengeance, shows no mercy. He slays Lycaon, a son of Priam, who begs for his life. He kills Asteropaeus, a warrior favored by the river. Each death adds to Scamander's anger, and the river god calls out to Achilles, demanding he stop polluting the sacred waters with blood and corpses. Achilles, undaunted, answers only with more violence. Suddenly, the river surges against Achilles, sending torrents of water and waves of mud to sweep him away. The ground shakes as Scamander, now an immense watery giant, attempts to drown the Greek hero. Achilles struggles in the torrent, dragged down by mud and tangled corpses. He calls to the gods for help, as the river's waves batter him. On Olympus, Hera sees Achilles' plight and dispatches Hephaestus, the divine smith, whose powers include mastery over fire. Hephaestus races to the plain and summons flames that roar along the riverbanks, boiling the waters and drying up the mud. The river god, scorched and driven back, surrenders his attack and retreats into the earth. The battlefield is littered with steam and smoldering bodies. Meanwhile, the other gods unleash their own feuds. Athena battles Ares, wounding the war god and driving him from the field. Hera and Artemis quarrel. Apollo and Poseidon exchange taunts. The immortal rivalries mirror the chaos below. With Scamander defeated and the gods fighting among themselves, Achilles resumes his bloody advance. The Trojans, watching in terror from their walls, scatter before him. He slays many as he drives the survivors back toward Troy. Panic reigns inside the city as mothers, children, and elders cry out for protection. Priam, king of Troy, orders the gates to be thrown open for his fleeing sons and warriors. But outside the walls, only Hector stands his ground, his heart heavy with knowledge of fate. He waits alone, ready to face Achilles, while the last rays of sun gleam off the city's battered towers. Achilles, drenched and smoke-streaked, stands amid the ruin, the wrath in his heart still unquenched. All know that the climactic duel is at hand, a meeting of destiny, vengeance, and mortal courage. The battlefield falls eerily silent as the sun sinks behind Troy's walls. The Trojans, terrified by Achilles' onslaught and the wrath of the gods, have fled within the safety of their city. Only Hector, the pride of Troy, remains outside the Scaean gates, his armor gleaming and his heart pounding with the weight of destiny. From the battlements, King Priam and Queen Hecuba beg their son to come inside, to save himself for Troy and for his family. Andromache, clutching their young son Astyanax, pleads through her tears, envisioning a future without her beloved husband. But Hector, torn between fear and honor, cannot abandon his post. He knows that Troy's fate and his own rests on his actions. Across the plain strides Achilles, his new armor shining like a living flame, hatred and grief burning in his eyes. The gods watch in anticipation. Apollo, who has guided Hector for so long, now withdraws, leaving the hero to his fate. Athena, invisible and relentless, stands at Achilles' side, ensuring that destiny is fulfilled. As Achilles approaches, Hector's courage falters. He turns and flees, running around the walls of Troy with Achilles in pursuit. 3 times they circled the city, their footsteps echoing through the anxious silence. At last, Athena, disguised as Hector's brother Deiphobus, tricks Hector into stopping and turning to face his doom. With nowhere left to run, Hector stands his ground. He proposes a pact that the victor will return the other's body to his people for proper burial. Achilles, lost in rage, refuses. The duel is swift and deadly. Hector throws his spear, but Athena deflects it. Achilles' spear, guided by a godly hand, finds the gap in Hector's armor, piercing his throat. As Hector collapses, he begs Achilles to respect his body and return it to Troy. Achilles, still burning with grief for Patroclus, denies him. With his last breath, Hector prophesies Achilles' own death, foretelling the hero's fate. The Greeks gather in awe around their champion. Achilles, unyielding, lashes Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the city walls, sending a message of vengeance to Troy. Inside the city, Priam, Hecuba, and Andromache scream in grief, their hearts broken by the loss of their greatest son. The day ends with Troy in mourning and the Greeks exultant. The hero of Troy has fallen, and the end of the war draws near. Yet the seeds of tragedy are not spent, for even Achilles cannot escape the hands of fate. As darkness settles over the Greek camp, the air is thick with mourning and exhaustion. Achilles, his vengeance fulfilled but his heart hollow, brings Patroclus's body back to the ships. The death of Hector has not eased his grief. Instead, he dedicates himself to honoring his dearest friend with a funeral fitting a hero. The entire Greek host gathers, united in sorrow and respect, to bid farewell to Patroclus. Achilles orders the construction of a great pyre. Warriors cut down black poplars, stacking them high on the shore. Patroclus's body, washed and anointed with precious oils, is laid atop the pyre, adorned in fine linen and covered with Achilles' own locks of golden hair. Shorn in mourning, around him, animals and treasures are placed, offerings to accompany him to the afterlife. Achilles slaughters horses, dogs, and Trojan captives, a grim testament to the ancient ways. As night falls, Achilles ignites the pyre, flames leaping to the sky. The Greeks stand in silence, tears gleaming in their eyes, while Achilles pours libations and prays for Patroclus's soul. The gods themselves watch as the fire consumes the fallen hero, the smoke rising to the heavens. With dawn, the embers are gathered, and Achilles places the bones of Patroclus in a golden urn, vowing to rest there himself when his own fate arrives. Yet even as grief weighs upon the camp, Achilles knows that the living must honor the dead through deeds and celebration of valor. Thus, he proclaims the funeral games for Patroclus, inviting the greatest warriors to compete for splendid prizes. The beach is transformed into an arena. Chariot races, boxing, wrestling, foot races, and contests of strength and skill. The Greeks set aside their sorrow for a day, each man striving to prove his excellence and win honor for the fallen. Fierce rivalries and deep camaraderie are on display. Diomedes wins the chariot race, besting even Menelaus and Antilochus. Ajax and Odysseus wrestle for supremacy, each gaining applause for their prowess. Archers, runners, and boxers all contend for Achilles' generous prizes. The spirit of Patroclus, honored and remembered, seems to watch over it all. As the sun sets, Achilles distributes the awards and shares a final feast with his comrades. Grief and pride mingle as they remember the friend they have lost and the battles that still lie ahead. The night is filled with music, stories, and the distant echo of mourning from the walls of Troy. The funeral games serve not only to honor Patroclus, but to remind the Greeks and their enemies that even in the darkest times, the memory of friendship and heroism endures. With the death of Hector, Troy is plunged into deep mourning. Within the walls, Priam, king of Troy, sits in silent despair. Hector's body lies outside, desecrated, and denied the burial rites due to Achilles' vengeance. Each day, Achilles drags Hector's corpse around Patroclus's tomb, and each day, the grief of Troy grows heavier. Hecuba and Andromache wail from the towers, and the people of Troy are lost in sorrow. One night, an extraordinary event unfolds. Guided by the god Hermes, Priam dares to leave Troy and slip into the Greek camp. Frail and unarmed, carrying only treasure and his broken heart, Priam enters Achilles' tent under cover of darkness. There, the old king kneels before the murderer of his son, clasping Achilles' hands in supplication. Priam speaks not as a king, but as a grieving father. He reminds Achilles of his own father, Peleus, far away and perhaps never to see his son return. The sight of Priam's humility and courage moves Achilles deeply. His anger softens, and tears fall as two enemies share their grief as fathers, united by pain that transcends war. Achilles gently takes Priam's hands and lifts him from the ground. Achilles agrees to return Hector's body for ransom. He orders his servants to wash and anoint the corpse, covering Hector with a fine cloak so that Priam may not see his son's wounds. That night, Achilles hosts Priam in his tent, sharing a meal and brief respite from the horrors of war. Even amidst the carnage, humanity and compassion endure. At dawn, Priam returns to Troy with Hector's body. The city erupts in mourning as Hecuba, Andromache, and Helen lead the lamentations. Hector's funeral rites are performed with all honor and tradition. His pyre is built high, and his ashes are placed in a golden urn, buried within Troy's walls. The entire city mourns as one, their grief echoing across the plain. For a moment, war gives way to sorrow and remembrance. The burial of Hector brings a fragile peace, and both Greeks and Trojans pause to honor the fallen hero, the defender of Troy. After the return of Hector's body, a profound silence settles over Troy. The city, once resounding with the noise of battle and hope, is now shrouded in mourning. Priam, the old king, wanders through the palace like a shadow, his heart crushed by the loss of his greatest son. Hecuba, Hector's mother, wraps herself in black, her cries echoing through the halls. Andromache sits in her chamber with Astyanax, mourning not only her husband but the uncertain future of their child and city. Helen, for whom the war was fought, stands at Hector's side, weeping for the brother-in-law who was always kind to her. Even as others cast blame, the women of Troy gather at the gates and towers, singing dirges and telling tales of Hector's courage, loyalty, and gentleness. For a few days, all enmity is forgotten. Even Paris, usually so proud, is humbled by the weight of loss. Throughout the city, people recall Hector's many deeds, his fierce battles on the plain, his compassion for the weak, and his unwavering love for Troy. Children are taught to speak his name with reverence. The walls of the city seem to weep with those inside. The funeral procession is a solemn spectacle. Hector's body, cleansed and robed, is placed on a high bier. Priam leads, leaning on his staff, followed by Hecuba, Andromache, Helen, and the noble women of Troy. The city's warriors, wounded and weary, march with heads bowed. The entire population pours into the streets to pay their respects, mourning not only a hero, but the fading light of their city's glory. At the funeral pyre, Andromache offers the first lament, her voice breaking as she speaks of lost love and shattered dreams. Hecuba follows, recalling the child she nursed and the man he became. Helen's song is last, a plea for forgiveness and a tribute to Hector's kindness. Thoring. As the flames rise, the sky seems to darken, and a hush falls over all of Troy. The ashes are collected in a golden urn and placed in a tomb within the city's walls. Priam decrees that the tomb will forever be a place of honor and remembrance. For days, Troy is united in its sorrow. No sound of war disturbs the peace. Only the songs of mourning rise over the city. The loss of Hector is more than the loss of a warrior. It is the loss of hope and a sign that Troy's end may be near. Yet, in their grief, the Trojans find strength and unity, determined to honor their hero's memory until the last. In the aftermath of Hector's funeral, a somber calm settles over Troy. Yet, on the heights of Mount Olympus, the gods are far from silent. The death of Troy's greatest champion signals a turning point, and all who dwell on high sense that fate now gathers in shadow. Zeus, king of gods, gazes down at the grieving city and the embattled plain, his eyes heavy with knowledge of what must come. The gods gather in council, debating the fate of Troy. Athena and Hera, relentless in their hatred of the city, press for its destruction, reminding Zeus of Paris's fateful judgment long ago. Aphrodite, ever the protector of her favored city, pleads for mercy, her heart aching for the suffering of Priam's house. Apollo, too, laments the looming end, remembering his years spent defending the walls and inspiring the Trojans. Zeus silences them all with a grave pronouncement. The fate of Troy was sealed from the moment Paris claimed Helen and broke the sacred bonds of guest and host. Mortal choices and divine pride have intertwined, and now the end is inevitable. Even he, mightiest of the immortals, must allow fate to unfold. The gods, some saddened and others vengeful, watch as the last chapters of the war prepare to unfold. Below, dreams and omens haunt the people of Troy and the Greeks alike. Priam dreams of the city's burning towers, while Hecuba sees visions of her children scattered and lost. Cassandra, the prophetess cursed to always speak true yet never be believed, cries warnings that go unheard. The Greek camp, too, is uneasy. Warriors whisper of new plots, secret schemes, and the final push for victory. On the plain, Odysseus and Diomedes meet in secret, planning the deception that will ultimately doom Troy. A new hope glimmers among the Greeks, inspired by Athena's guidance and the restless ambition of their leaders. The gods move unseen, nudging mortal hearts and hands. As night falls, the winds shift and the stars blaze with peculiar brightness. It is as though the universe itself pauses to witness the unfolding tragedy. The gods, for all their power, can only watch as the ancient city nears its destined end. On this night, the sorrow of the gods mirrors that of mortals. The city of Troy stands proud but doomed, awaiting the storm that will sweep away even the greatest of heroes. With Hector gone and hope dwindling, Troy endures a long siege. The Greeks encamp just beyond the battered walls. Yet, victory remains elusive for both sides. Odysseus, renowned for his cunning, proposes a plan that will forever change the course of the war: the construction of a gigantic wooden horse. Within this hollow statue, a select band of Greek warriors will hide while the main Greek army pretends to sail away, leaving the horse as a supposed offering to the gods. Under cover of night, the Greeks build the mighty structure. Hippaeus, a master carpenter, oversees the work, Antintontig, fashioning the horse to be both magnificent and cavernous enough to house a score of heroes. Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and Ajax the Lesser are among those chosen to hide within. The rest of the Greeks set fire to their tents, board their ships, and vanish into the dawn mist. At least, so it seems to Troy. Morning comes, and the Trojans are stunned to find the enemy camp abandoned, and the massive horse standing at their gates. Some urge caution. Laocoon, the priest, and Cassandra, ever the voice of unheeded truth, warn the city not to trust the gift. Laocoon hurls a spear into the horse's flank. But fate intervenes. Two sea serpents emerge from the waves and devour him and his sons. Wutter befort, a sign interpreted by all as punishment for doubting the gods. Swept up in joy and relief, the Trojans open the gates and drag the horse into the city, planning a grand celebration. Only a few remain uneasy. Cassandra, whose prophecies go unheeded, and Aeneas, who prepares for any calamity. That night, Troy is filled with revelry. Wine flows, fires burn, and laughter echoes in the streets as the horse stands tall in the citadel's heart. Inside the horse, Odysseus and his companions wait in silence, swords drawn and nerves taut. As the city sleeps, Sinon, a cunning Greek left behind, slips from his bonds and signals to the hidden fleet, which returns under the cover of dawn. At the appointed hour, the Greeks emerge from the horse, open the gates, and unleash the final assault. Troy's fate is sealed not by strength, but by cunning and deception. The oldest weapons of all, night envelops Troy as the city, weary and unsuspecting, celebrates what they believe is their victory over the Greeks. Bonfires burn in the streets, music and laughter fill the air, and citizens dance in the torchlight. The monumental wooden horse stands in the heart of the city, a trophy and a symbol of their supposed deliverance. But beneath this veil of joy, doom lurks in the shadows. As midnight deepens and revelers succumb to sleep, Sinon, the crafty Greek left behind, creeps from his hiding place and quietly opens the belly of the horse. Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, Ajax the Lesser, and the other Greek warriors slip out and descend silently into the heart of Troy. Like phantoms, they move through the dark streets, killing sentries and opening the city gates to the Greek army, which has returned under. A great shout rises as Greek warriors pour into the city, swords gleaming and torches flaring. Troy awakens to chaos. Flames leap from rooftops, screams pierce the night, and the clashing of swords rings from every alley. The Trojans, caught off guard and unarmed, scramble to defend their homes, but the city's fate is sealed. King Priam, old and unarmed, is cut down at the altar by Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. Queen Hecuba, Andromache, and other royal women are seized and dragged from their homes. Paris fights bravely, but falls in the melee. Cassandra is dragged from Athena's temple, her prophecies drowned out by the roar of battle. Aeneas, guided by omens and visions, gathers his family and a few followers, fleeing the inferno that consumes his home. Everywhere the devastation is complete. The proud towers of Troy, once the envy of the world, are toppled. The fires burn so bright they light the night for miles around. The city's treasures are looted, and its people, those who survive, are led away in chains. By dawn, Troy is a smoldering ruin, its glory shattered and its spirit broken. Only echoes remain of the city that stood against the might of Greece for 10 long years. For the victors, the cost of victory is high. For the vanquished, the price is everything. The gods, watching from afar, mourn the folly and pride that brought Troy to ruin. Among the ashes, only memory and legend remain. Usual. With the fall of Troy, dawn reveals a city of ashes and heartbreak. The survivors, once princes and proud warriors, queens and noblewomen, are rounded up amid the ruins. The Greeks, flushed with victory yet burdened by 10 years of suffering, begin to divide their prizes. For the Trojans, it is a time of sorrow and loss, each person facing a new and uncertain destiny. Queen Hecuba, her royal robes torn and her hair disheveled, is led away in chains. Once the proud mother of mighty Hector, she is now a captive, her future in foreign lands unknown. Andromache, her infant son Astyanax torn from her arms, is given to Neoptolemus, son of Achilles. The fate of Astyanax is cruel. Fearful of the boy growing up to seek revenge, the Greeks cast him from the city's walls. Andromache's grief is immeasurable. Helen, the woman for whom the war was fought, is led to Menelaus. At first he is filled with rage, but her beauty and sorrow move him. He spares her life and claims her once more as his wife, though she returns to Sparta in shame and infamy. Cassandra, the doomed prophetess, is taken by Agamemnon as his prize. Her warnings go unheeded to the end, and her fate will be tragic even after leaving Troy. Polyxena, another daughter of Priam, is chosen for a sacrificial offering at the tomb of Achilles, her death sealing the final cruelty inflicted on Troy's royal house. Aeneas, bearing his father on his back and leading his young son, slips away from the city with a handful of followers. Guided by omens and the will of the gods, he begins the long journey that will, in distant lands, give rise to new hopes and legends. The Greek victors gather their spoils, gold, slaves, and treasures. Some, like Odysseus, are haunted by what they have seen and done, sensing that the gods are not yet finished with them. The seas that once brought them to Troy now await to test them further. The people of Troy are scattered to the winds. Some become slaves. Others vanish into legend. The city itself, once the jewel of Asia, lies in smoldering ruins, a grim warning of the cost of pride and the inexorable power of fate. As the Greeks set sail for home, storms gather on the horizon. The gods watch, some satisfied, some grieving. The last echoes of Troy fade into the dawn, but the stories of its heroes, victims, and survivors will endure for all time. With Troy reduced to ashes, the long war at last comes to a close. The Greeks, weary but triumphant, prepare to set sail for their distant homelands. But victory is bittersweet, and the air is thick with foreboding. As the conquering heroes load their ships with spoils and prisoners, the gods, angered by their cruelty and pride, stir the winds and trouble the sea. Agamemnon, king of kings, departs with Cassandra, his tragic prize. Little does he know that blood and betrayal await him in Mycenae. Menelaus leads Helen, his reclaimed wife, back toward Sparta, but the ghosts of Troy and the shadow of her beauty will haunt them always. Odysseus, clever and restless, sets out on a voyage destined to become legend, facing shipwrecks, monsters, and the wrath of Poseidon before he will ever see Ithaca again. On the shore, the Trojans who survived, Hecuba, Andromache, and others, look back at their ruined city, and they sue, hearts broken but memories break. Aeneas, carrying his father Anchises and leading his young son Ascanius, escapes westward with a small band of followers. Guided by the gods, he will endure storms and trials to reach Italy, where the last embers of Troy will be kindled anew. The Greeks' homeward journeys are fraught with tragedy. Many will perish at sea or meet grim fates upon their return. Agamemnon slain by his wife, Ajax the Lesser destroyed by the gods for his impiety, and Neoptolemus, though a victor, haunted by the cost of his deeds. Even the mighty Menelaus will wander years before reclaiming his throne. Yet from the ashes of Troy, new legends arise. The story of Aeneas, passed down through generations, will become the founding myth of Rome. an empire destined to echo the glory and suffering of Troy itself. As the last ships disappear over the horizon, the plain of Troy grows silent, reclaimed by grass and wildflowers. Only the wind and the distant cries of seabirds remain. But in the hearts of poets and storytellers, the deeds and sorrows of this war will never fade. The Iliad ends not with triumphant joy, but with the somber knowledge that glory and tragedy are forever entwined. The war leaves scars on victors and vanquished alike. In the endless retelling of these tales, the memory of Troy, its love and loss, its bravery and ruin, becomes immortal. Thus, the legacy of Troy endures, a lesson for all ages that fate cannot be outrun, pride brings ruin, and even in the darkest night, the seeds of new hope and new stories are sown. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Iliad, a timeless epic that has shaped the way we understand heroism, fate, and the cost of pride. We have walked the blood-soaked plains of Troy, stood beside mighty warriors like Achilles and Hector, and witnessed the joys and sorrows of both gods and mortals. Through Science chapters, we have explored not only legendary battles, but the hearts of those who fought, loved, and lost in the shadow of destiny. The fall of Troy marks not just the end of a war, but the birth of new stories and enduring lessons. The sacrifices, betrayals, and acts of compassion remind us that the greatest struggles are fought within the soul. The names of Achilles, Hector, Andromache, Priam, and countless others will echo across generations, inspiring us to reflect on our own choices and the world we shape. We hope this retelling has brought new life to Homer's epic, allowing you to feel the grandeur and tragedy of the Iliad. Thank you for watching, for remembering, and for keeping the spirit of these ancient heroes alive. Until our next adventure, farewell.